My name is Chad Curtis, and I'm primarily a sculptor, and I live and work in Philadelphia and teach at the Tyler School of Art. Material choices come from a number of places. I'm trained as a ceramic artist, so oftentimes it begins there, but not necessarily. Beyond that, the materials are chosen for different reasons, primarily for the type of ideas I want to address the work. And to some degree, then, pragmatic choices about what materials, certain tools that I tend to use will actually work well with. So it really depends on the situation and the type of piece or the content of the piece that I'm working with. Work all draws from primarily the natural world as iconography, and so I really am trying to ask my viewers to consider the natural world relative to the man-made world, or more specifically the natural world relative to the digital world, and the connection between those two places. And then furthermore, how there's a continuing or a growing disconnect between the lives we tend to lead and the natural environment around us. Initially, I really considered materials, and I still do in particular pieces in different ways. But I think also to some degree recently, my range of materials has expanded to a particular kind of, say, palette that I draw from. And then those are manipulated or altered depending on the piece. But then in other cases, there's a particular idea I want to address, or something I want to communicate, and so then other materials are drawn in specifically for those reasons. About 5 years ago, I had a real strong desire to bring that digital into my work, both as a tool for making, but also as literally being involved in the display of the work. And that is just starting to happen now after 5 years of kind of finding different ways to do that. So I think in terms of the next 5 years, my work is really moving in that direction. And for me, it's the kind of hybrid between technology and that digital aesthetic and this sense of high tech combined with very low tech, crude, rudimentary materials that I'm interested in. So going back to the clay, going back to cardboard and raw wood and things of that nature, and trying to draw some sort of connection between those two things, much like the connection between the handmade and the digital that I was referring to a bit ago. Again, for me, a lot of the idea of this work and things that I'm influenced by come from digital culture and primarily the internet. And what started the idea for a lot of this current work in this exhibition was the idea of the internet creating a sense of dislocation, or a lack of necessity for location. The way that it collapses space in some way. And for me as a sculptor, that's an interesting idea, this ability to collapse a space. So I'm really drawing heavily from that, and that initially started with even Google Earth, and that ability to, or at least the idea that one can experience the world from sitting in a computer in a very specific place and understand what it means to be at the Eiffel Tower, and we all know how false that actually is. So using that as a place to begin. And then I'm also drawing from DIY culture in terms of the electronics, but also in terms of a lot of the ceramics in here come from hobby stores. And it's precast stuff that I'm just simply painting and using as an icon, as opposed to more of a mode of expression that's about my handling the material. And then beyond that, even further, perhaps, certainly the natural world is a source of inspiration, and the kind of tension I feel with that. Pop culture in terms of iconography, or even graphic design and the way that symbolism functions with specific icons. And then design and home decor even enters in there to some degree as well, and my material choices and the kind of sense of presentation that I hope to some degree has a domestic quality to it. The advice I tend to give my students right up front is to know that going into it, it's a difficult road that requires a lot of conviction, because there's not always a whole lot of reassurance coming from anyone other than getting up in the morning and going to the studio and working yourself. So I think certainly that sense of conviction about the work, which again as an emerging artist is hard, because you have very little reaction or feedback from an audience to keep that going. But beyond that, then, is the obvious, is just to get up every day and go to the studio and do the work, even if it means you have a full-time job and it's only an hour at the beginning or the end of the day to maintain and sustain that practice. And to continue, at least for me, to push the boundaries of the practice of what's acceptable or what's conventional in some way. And then take that and make sure that really establishing strong connections with different institutions and other artists, and build a network.